All right, today we're going to go over our homework EOC review number 5. Just talking about our properties. So match each property to the examples. Number 1, we have the commutative property of addition. So since I'm looking for addition, I'm going to look at my answer choices here, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and I see that F has the property, the commutative property of addition. The commutative property of multiplication. Well, now I'm looking for multiplication, and that just means that x times y is the same thing as y times x, which is B. Number 3, the associative property of addition. That means that if one number or letter is associated inside the parentheses, it can be associated with a different number inside the parentheses as long as they're still adding. So we're looking at the association property, which just means that x and y, or x, y, and z in this case, are being associated with different numbers when they are added. So that is C. Associative property of multiplication. Okay, same concept. We're just associating the numbers with different numbers. So we're going to look for something with parentheses. So that leaves D and E. But E is the one that's talking about associative property of multiplication, because if you look at it here, the x and y are associated first and then multiplied by z. And then in the second part, it says x multiplied by y times z, but you're still going to end up with the same answer because of the associative property of multiplication. Addition property of equality. So again, we're looking for addition, and it's talking about the property of equality, which means whatever I do to one side of the equal sign, I'm going to have to do to the other. So our answer here is G, because I added the A to the left side of the parenthesis, or of the equal sign here, so I had to add A to the right side of the equal sign as well. And that's true because of the addition property of equality. Then I have the multiplication property of equality. Again, whatever I do to the left, I have to do to the right. Well, in this equation, I multiplied the left side of my equation by A, and I multiplied the right side of my equation by A. And so the correct answer here is letter A. Finally, we have the distributive property. And the distributive property saying that I'm going to be distributing that 3 that's outside the parentheses to each term inside the parentheses, and it's still the same equation. So that letter is D. And it looks like I forgot to highlight my multiplication property. So there we go. So that's a quick review of all of our different properties that we use to solve equations. So let's look at number 8. It says Thomas is doing a proof for solving the equation 6 multiplied by 2x minus 5 equals negative 34. Some of his work is shown. So all we did was take this first equation and put it in. And our first step when doing a proof is always going to be given. Okay, for number 2, how did we go? What would we do next? Well, to go from step 1 to step 2, we would need to distribute that 6. I'm going to redo that so that you can actually see the number. So when you multiply 6 times 2x, you're going to get 12x. But don't forget to also multiply that 6 times that negative 5, and so you're going to get negative 30. And then that's going to equal a negative 34. And the property that we used in step number 2 was the distributive property. Because all we did was distribute that 6 to both terms in the parentheses. Now to go from step 2 to step 3, all I did was actually add 30 to both sides. So when I added 30 to both sides, which rule was I using? Which property? Well, that looks just like letter G, which is the addition property of equality. And I'm just going to write addition property because I'm out of space, but that's the addition property of equality. And to go from step 3 to step 4, I actually had to divide by 12 and divide by 12. And so I find that x is equal to 4 over 12, or simplified would be 1 over 3. And that's your division property of equality. So the question asks, what is the correct reason for number 3? Well, number 3, we use the addition property of equality. All right, looking at number 9. Jamie is doing a proof for solving the equation 2 multiplied by 3x plus 5 equals 5 multiplied by x minus 4. Some of his work is shown. So again, we started off just with the provided equation, so that's reason number 1 is always given. To go from reason 1 to number 2, what did we do? Well, we used the distributive property again. We distributed that 2 to both terms in the parentheses on the left side of the equal sign, and the 5 to both terms in the parentheses on the right side of the equal sign. So we just used the distributive property. To go from step 2 to step 3, what did we do? Well, we had 6x plus 10 equals 5x minus 20, but now we just have 1x. So that means we subtracted 5x from the right and we subtracted 5x from the left. But if you look at my rules, I don't have anything in here about subtraction. Everything's either addition or multiplication. But remember that when you are subtracting something, you're really just adding a negative. So it's still the same property, we're just adding a negative instead of subtracting. So our rule here would be our addition property of equality, or the addition property. And then from step 3 to step 4, we again had to subtract a number. We had to subtract 10 and subtract 10. But just like before, when you are adding, you can add a negative or subtract, so you would still use the addition property. Right, and the correct reasons: choose from symmetric property of equality, subtraction property of equality, division property of equality, distributive property, or closure property. Well, we used the distributive property. That was step 2. And here they did use subtraction property. That's okay. Subtraction property and addition property are used interchangeably. So I'm going to just write addition up on the top because we didn't review what subtraction property was. Because commonly you're going to see it listed as addition property because you're adding a negative. And those are the only 2 rules that we used. We didn't need to use the division property because we were left with 1x once we used the addition property. Okay? So that's it for review number 1, or review number 5, sorry. This is review number 5, Monday's homework on April 5th.